About 255 million years ago, stepping into the water could be the safer decision. Not safe, just safer. Imagine a small dicynodont moving across a dry floodplain on the supercontinent Pangaea. It is low to the ground, built for eating tough vegetation, and surrounded by open space. There are few places to hide. Ahead lies a broad river. Behind it, something is moving with long legs, a heavy skull, and two saber-shaped canine teeth. That animal is a Gorgonopsian, one of the dominant predators of the Late Permian. Some species were only the size of a dog. Others grew large enough to attack the biggest herbivores around them. Their skulls carried enormous canines, their jaws opened unusually wide, and their limbs were becoming better suited for moving beneath the body instead of sprawling completely to the sides. They were not mammals, but they belonged to the branch of life that would eventually produce mammals. And they were not the only problem. Therocephalians shared the same landscapes. Many were smaller, quicker predators with powerful jaws. Some had unusually enlarged canine teeth, and at least a few species may have delivered venom or some other toxic bite, although that interpretation is still debated. Large Gorgonopsians could bring down heavy prey. Smaller hunters could chase animals that escaped them. Even the middle of the food web had teeth. The land itself made those hunters harder to avoid. Most of Earth's major landmasses had joined into Pangaea, creating a vast continental interior. Many regions were strongly seasonal and dry. Forests, river systems, and vegetated floodplains existed, but large stretches of the interior could be hot, exposed, and short on permanent water. Animals were repeatedly funneled toward rivers, lakes, and wetlands because that was where food and moisture collected. This sounds like the worst possible reason to enter the water. A crowded riverbank is basically a restaurant where the customers are also the menu. But the late Permian had an unusual imbalance. Terrestrial predators had already become large, specialized, and efficient. The ocean still contained sharks, predatory fish, and dangerous invertebrates, but they had not yet been taken over by the giant marine reptiles that would dominate later eras. There were no mosasaurs, no plesiosaurs, and no fully developed ichthyosaur empires patrolling offshore waters. For many animals, water also offered something the open ground did not: three-dimensional escape. A pursuing land predator had to slow down, wade, or stop at the bank. A smaller animal could dive, turn sharply, hide among plants, or move through mud that made a large hunter clumsy. The water was not peaceful, but for the moment the land had become worse. That advantage became even more important when the entire world began to break down. Around 252 million years ago, enormous volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia released vast amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Temperatures rose. Oceans lost oxygen and became more acidic. Weather patterns shifted. Vegetation collapsed across many regions, and the end Permian mass extinction erased most species on Earth. Life on land was hit from several directions at once. Heat increased the amount of water animals lost through their bodies. Drought reduced lakes and rivers. With fewer plants, herbivores struggled, and when herbivores disappeared, predators followed. Food webs that had taken millions of years to assemble came apart. Water could not protect animals from a planetary crisis. Rivers overheated, wetlands dried out, and stagnant pools could become oxygen poor, but animals that were already tied to freshwater sometimes had options that fully terrestrial species lacked. Large amphibians known as temnospondyls were among them. These were not simply oversized modern frogs. They were a diverse group with broad skulls, heavy bodies, and lifestyles ranging from mostly terrestrial to almost completely aquatic. Many waited in rivers and lakes for fish or smaller animals to come within reach. Some temnospondyl lineages crossed the extinction boundary and became widespread during the early Triassic. Water helped them avoid rapid temperature swings, and their aquatic prey could remain available even where land-based food chains had collapsed. Their flat bodies also allowed them to remain submerged with little effort, turning muddy channels into both hunting grounds and shelters. Small animals could use the same environments differently. Burrows near riverbanks held more stable temperatures and moisture than exposed ground. Shallow water supported insects, fish, crustaceans, and decaying organic material. Even when surrounding vegetation was sparse, a surviving wetland could concentrate enough food to keep a local community alive. But concentration created danger. A shrinking pool did not only gather prey, it gathered every predator that needed the same water. A thirsty herbivore approaching the bank might escape a hunter on open ground only to enter the strike zone of an aquatic ambush predator. Safety depended on what was chasing you and what was already waiting below the surface. The early Triassic reptile Proterosuchus captured that problem. It had an elongated body, a long snout with sharp teeth, and limbs that could carry it across land, although researchers still debate exactly how aquatic different species were. It probably hunted around rivers and floodplains, where weakened animals were forced to drink. Water had begun as an escape route from the dominant hunters of the land. After the extinction, predators started following prey towards that refuge, and some of them became increasingly comfortable staying there. That shift did not take millions of quiet years. Within roughly 4 million years of the extinction, the first clear communities of Mesozoic marine reptiles were appearing in the oceans. Some of the earliest were small, strange animals that still looked like experiments in progress. Cartorhynchus had a short snout, broad flippers, and a body only partly committed to life at sea. It belonged close to the origin of ichthyosaurs, the group that would later produce fast, dolphin-shaped hunters and enormous open ocean predators. Other early forms, including hupehsuchians, developed stiff bodies and unusual jaws, suited to feeding in the water. Sauropterygians followed a different route. Early members were generally smaller coastal reptiles, but their descendants would eventually include long-necked plesiosaurs and powerful marine hunters. These groups were not descendants of one aquatic ancestor. Reptiles entered the water repeatedly, each lineage modifying limbs, tails, lungs, bones, and feeding systems in its own way. That matters because it changed the basic calculation. During the Late Permian, entering a river or moving along a coast could remove an animal from the reach of many specialized land predators. In the Triassic, more predators began treating water not as a boundary, but as habitat. They could pursue prey below the surface, reproduce near or within aquatic environments, and exploit food chains that terrestrial hunters could barely touch. By the Middle Triassic, some marine ecosystems already contained large apex predators, along with smaller reptiles using different feeding strategies. Fish eaters, shell crushers, ambush hunters, and open water pursuers divided the same environments between them. The refuge had become a complete battlefield, so there was never a single age when every lake, river, and ocean was safe. Sharks and large fish already existed in the Permian, and freshwater ambush predators could make a riverbank lethal. The real pattern is relative. For certain animals in certain places, especially when chased by hunters built for open ground, water offered an escape route that land could not. Then evolution erased that advantage. Whenever prey concentrates in a habitat that predators cannot use well, natural selection creates an opportunity. Any hunter that can cross the boundary gains access to food with fewer competitors. Over generations, awkward waders can become swimmers, swimmers can become specialists, and a temporary shelter can turn into a new ecosystem ruled by teeth. The water was safer only while the worst hunters were still standing on shore. And when climate transformed places far from those ancient rivers, the same rule reshaped entire continents. To see what that looked like, watch What Was Antarctica Like Before It Froze. Thanks for watching.